Before you were born, your ancestors had already been solving a problem you never had to think about. How much sunlight should the human body allow in? Too much ultraviolet radiation can damage cells and break down folate. Too little can make it harder for the body to produce enough vitamin D. And somewhere between those two dangers, over hundreds of thousands of years, human skin began taking on different shades. But here's the strange part. The color of your skin is not a measurement of how different you are from another human being. It is evidence of something much older: sunlight. Your skin is carrying a record of the environment your ancestors survived in. And the unsettling question is, if every human being began with the same ancient ancestors, how did our skin become so different? The answer begins somewhere you might not expect. Not with race, not with culture, not with geography on a map, but with a molecule inside your skin, called melanin. Melanin is the pigment responsible for much of the color in human skin, hair, and eyes. And your body produces it for a reason. Every day, sunlight reaches your skin. Some of that sunlight contains ultraviolet radiation, or UV radiation. Your body needs sunlight. But too much UV radiation can damage DNA and can also contribute to the breakdown of folate, a vitamin involved in important biological processes, including reproduction and development. So the human body needed protection, and one of its most remarkable solutions was already sitting inside us. Melanin. Think of it almost like a biological shield. The more melanin your skin produces and retains, the more effectively it can absorb and scatter some ultraviolet radiation before that radiation penetrates deeper into your skin. But then there is another problem. Your body also needs sunlight for something important: vitamin D. And producing vitamin D in the skin depends partly on UVB radiation reaching the skin. So now evolution was dealing with a strange balancing act. Too much UV radiation creates risks. Too little can create another problem. And this is where everything changes. Because early humans did not live under the same sun. Our ancestors migrated. They crossed landscapes. They moved away from the intense ultraviolet radiation of equatorial Africa and eventually settled in regions where sunlight was weaker, especially at higher latitudes. And the farther humans moved from the equator, the sunlight changed. Not because the sun itself became different, but because the Earth was getting in the way. At higher latitudes, sunlight arrives at a different angle. During much of the year, less UVB reaches the surface, and that created a new evolutionary pressure. Imagine generations of humans living in environments where intense sunlight is no longer the constant threat, it was closer to the equator. The biological balance begins to shift. There is less pressure for extremely high levels of pigmentation. And over many generations, populations living in different environments could gradually evolve different average levels of skin pigmentation. Not because one group became more human than another, but because the same human species was adapting to different environments. This is one of the most important things to understand about human skin color. It is not a collection of separate human types. It is variation within one species. And the variation is gradual. If you could travel across the world from one population to another, you would not find invisible lines where one kind of human suddenly ends and another begins. You would find gradients, thousands of subtle differences shaped by ancestry, migration, sunlight, selection, and chance. Human skin is not divided neatly into categories by nature. We are the ones who created many of those categories. And that is where the science becomes psychologically uncomfortable, because humans have spent enormous amounts of history looking at visible differences and imagining that those differences reveal something much deeper: intelligence, character, worth, strength, inferiority, superiority. But skin color cannot tell you those things. The pigment you see on another person's skin is primarily the visible result of biology interacting with ancestry and environment. The same species, the same fundamental human machinery, different histories, different adaptations. And there is an even stranger detail. Skin color itself is not simply controlled by one magical skin color gene. It is influenced by many genes working together. Genes involved in melanin production, distribution, and regulation can all contribute to pigmentation. That is why human skin exists across such a continuous spectrum. Dark brown, brown, tan, olive, light brown, pale, and countless shades in between. Nature rarely cares about the neat categories humans prefer. Biology is messy, continuous, layered, and deeply interconnected. But if skin color is largely an adaptation to sunlight, then something interesting should happen when humans move. And it does. Consider a person whose ancestors evolved in a region with intense UV radiation. Their skin pigmentation reflects a long history of adaptation to that environment. Now imagine their descendants moving somewhere with dramatically different sunlight. The environment has changed in a single migration. But evolution doesn't change a population overnight. The body does not receive a new GPS coordinate and instantly redesign itself. Generations pass. And across those generations, natural selection can change the frequency of genetic variants within populations. This is what makes evolution so strange. It doesn't plan. There is no evolutionary committee deciding, humans are moving north, we should make their skin lighter. There is no destination. There is only variation. And then the environment. Some variations may make survival or reproduction slightly easier under particular conditions. Those variants can become more common over generations. Eventually, an entire population can look different from its distant ancestors, not because evolution had a goal, but because small differences accumulated. And then, something even stranger happened. Humans started moving again, over and over, across continents, across deserts, across mountains, across oceans. People who had lived under one kind of sunlight began living under another. And the story became more complicated, because modern humans do not stay where their ancestors evolved. Someone with very dark skin can live in northern Europe. Someone with very light skin can live near the equator. Someone with ancestors from multiple regions can inherit a combination of pigmentation-related genetic variants. Modern civilization has disrupted the simple relationship between ancestry and environment. We travel by airplane. We live indoors. We wear clothing. We use sunscreen. We work under artificial lights. We take vitamin D supplements. The environment that shaped our ancestors is no longer the environment that shapes every person's daily life. And yet their evolutionary history remains visible on our skin. That may be the most beautiful and unsettling part. Your skin is not merely the surface of your body, it is a biological archive. It carries clues about the environments your ancestors inhabited. It reflects a history of migration, a history of sunlight, a history of survival. Long before anyone invented the concept of race, human beings were already moving. Long before borders existed, long before nations, long before passports, long before anyone could look at a map and say, "These people belong here." Humans were walking. And as they walked, they encountered different climates, different diets, different diseases, different ultraviolet environments. Evolution responded slowly, culture responded quickly, and eventually humans began turning physical differences into social categories. This is where we need to be careful, because the existence of biological variation does not mean that the social concept of race maps neatly onto biology. It doesn't. Human genetic variation is distributed in complicated patterns. Many genetic differences do correlate to ancestry and geographic history, but the boundaries humans draw between racial categories are not clean biological boundaries. They are historical and cultural categories layered onto a species whose variation is much more complicated. And skin color is one of the easiest differences for humans to notice. You don't need a microscope to see it. You don't need a genetic test. You can see it from across a room. And humans are extremely good at categorizing what they see. Our brains constantly search for patterns. We group faces, voices, objects, behaviors. We decide what looks familiar and what looks different. That ability can be useful. But it can also become dangerous. Because once a visible difference becomes associated with a social story, the brain can start treating the story as though it were biology. A difference in appearance becomes a difference in identity. Then identity becomes a judgment. And suddenly, a molecule called melanin is carrying meanings it was never designed to carry. Melanin does not know your nationality. It does not know your religion. It does not know your intelligence. It does not know whether you are kind or cruel. It doesn't know whether your ancestors were kings or farmers. It doesn't know whether you were born in Lagos, London, Delhi, Sao Paulo, or Tokyo. It simply absorbs light. And yet humans have looked at the amount of that pigment in one another's skin and built entire systems of meaning around it. That is the uncomfortable paradox. The biological difference is real, but the meaning we attach to that difference can be enormous. And those are not the same thing. Your skin color is real. The evolutionary history behind it is real. But the idea that skin color tells you the value of a human being, that is a story humans created. And perhaps we can understand why the difference exists without turning the difference into a hierarchy. Because when you zoom out far enough, something becomes almost impossible to ignore. Every human population alive today is part of the same species. We share the overwhelming majority of our genetic heritage. The differences that capture our attention are tiny compared with the biological machinery we share. We have the same basic organs, the same fundamental nervous system, the same biological need for food, sleep, safety, attachment, and connection. We laugh. We cry. We fear death. We fall in love. We protect our children. We lose people. We remember. We imagine futures that don't exist yet. And underneath all of that, our skin is simply responding to a very old problem. How do you survive beneath the sun? Maybe that is why skin color is such a fascinating thing to think about. Because something we often treat as an identity marker is also a survival story. The darker pigmentation common in many populations, with long histories in high UV environments, reflects protection against intense ultraviolet radiation. Lighter pigmentation evolved multiple times in different populations living in regions where UV radiation was lower, likely reflecting the importance of maintaining enough UVB exposure for vitamin D production while balancing other pressures. The details are complicated. Evolution usually is. There was never one moment when humanity changed from one color to another. No single ancestor woke up one morning with a completely different body. The transformation happened slowly, almost invisibly. One generation, then another, until thousands of tiny changes became visible across populations. And that means something strange about the person you are looking at right now. Their skin may look different from yours, but that difference may be telling a story about where their ancestors spent generations beneath the sun. Not a story of separate humanity, a story of shared humanity adapting to different worlds. The same species, wearing different solutions to the same ancient problem. And maybe the deepest irony is this: we spend so much time looking at the color of someone's skin that we sometimes forget what it actually represents. Movement, adaptation, survival. Thousands of generations of human beings, living, migrating, having children, and surviving long enough for their descendants to exist. Your skin is the result of people you will never meet. People who lived before countries had names, before cities covered the earth, before anyone could imagine satellites, smartphones, or photographs. They lived beneath different skies, and their bodies slowly adapted to the light. Now you carry part of that history with you, everywhere you go. So the next time you look at another human being and notice the difference in their skin, remember what you're actually seeing. Not a different kind of human, not a biological hierarchy, not a boundary between us and them. You're seeing the visible aftermath of an ancient journey, a journey that began in Africa and spread across a planet filled with different suns. The strange thing is not that humans have different skin colors. The strange thing is that one species managed to survive across so much of the earth and left the memory of that journey on its skin. And perhaps, beneath every shade of human skin, there is the same ancient story. A human being standing beneath the sun, trying to survive long enough for someone else to be born. For more, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel.